my grief is more for my kids now. It's about what they're missing. Like, I feel okay, I feel good, but they will always have these milestones that their dad misses.
Welcome to episode 3 of Ugly Cry. I'm your host, Tess. I founded the service Upsprout to support grieving folks after my own experience with grief and loss. And then I started this podcast as a way to break through some of the silence and isolation around these topics. More lies, more conversation, girl, it really don't matter 'cause I'm not leaving you. Today I'm talking with Michelle Bader, a widow who has found love again after losing her husband. I find Michelle to be very self-assured in the absolute best way. She frequently posts videos of herself dancing and rebuffing internet trolls that tell her that she's too happy for a widow. Although the internet is full of keyboard warriors with strong opinions about strangers, I think the amount of intensity of hate that Michelle receives is unusual. And although I know that those opinions are so often misdirected anger and sadness, I can't help but wonder what about Michelle's story specifically calls people to comment. Michelle's story involves love, loss, exploring death and loss alongside children, religion, finding joy after loss. I think Michelle is speaking to some of the most scary parts of being human. And for some, I suppose, that fear is big enough that they don't know where else to put it. So, without further ado, let's set aside our own fears, get curious, and hear Michelle's story. So, I want to understand sort of the full picture of your experience. And I know sometimes we get to talk a lot about like the death moments, but I really want to go back even more and understand your Luke love story. Can we start there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, Luke and I met in high school, so long time ago. He graduated in 96. I graduated in 97. We met probably my freshman year. So he was a sophomore, and we, either that year or soon after, we had home ec together. And I would just talk to him about all these boys, and he'd give me advice. And I never dated him. I had like several friends that dated him, but just, I don't know, we didn't date at that time. It wasn't the right timing. And he graduated, and then I went away to college. He was dating someone at that time. I was dating somebody. And then after I graduated, through mutual friends, we ran into each other again, and we really liked each other. It took a few months of him being ready, and then he was like, I'm ready to date you. And 3 months from our first date, he proposed to me, and we were married a year later, like a year. We got together on August 23rd, and we got married August 22nd of the next year. So it was just like, I think what I believe, when it's right, it's right. And totally God's timing with all the other things that came after that. So he was 25, I was 24, and it was like this big, beautiful fairy tale wedding, and this gazebo and thousands of twinkling white lights, and just like amazing start to our marriage. And we went to Hawaii on our honeymoon. And before that, he had noticed a big lump in his ankle. And he was, young, and the doctors were like, yeah, it's nothing's tendonitis. Don't worry about it. He had a walking route as a mail carrier. And so he noticed it getting worse and worse. And so after we got married for a few more months, he was like, it's getting worse. I got to go to the doctor. So this is probably like December after we got married. And he went, and he said he could talk. They did an x-ray, and he could hear them. And they're like, yeah, we need to have this looked at more. So then they scheduled a biopsy, and I was still, and we had just found out we were pregnant. So it was like a whole bunch of stuff right away. Like, I had this teaching job I loved. He had a mail carrier job. It was like this perfect, we got pregnant, and we're excited. And then in January, so that must have been January 2004, he had the biopsy. And I remember the day that they called us and told us it was a very rare bone cancer, usually found in kids. And so by that time he was 26. And they did not know how to treat it. And so they just started all these like crazy chemo regimens, and he would stay 5 nights at a time in the hospital. I stayed with him, and it was just, crazy time. And it just made him really sick and lost his hair and all the chemo stuff. And then they noticed it didn't shrink his tumor at all. So then they were like, well, you have 2 choices. You can either have the surgery where we try to like take out the tumor, but it has a high chance of coming back, and you have to wear a special boot the rest of your life, or we can leave a big margin so that, it's far from the cancer, and amputate your leg below the right knee. So after a lot of prayer and thought and talking to lots and lots of people, we decided on the amputation. And so May 7th, 2004, he had his leg amputated, and that's what we considered his last cancer day. And that was the day we celebrated every year for a while. And so he had his amputation, which was really hard. He was this athlete, all-star baseball, like very athletic. So it changed completely like what he could do. And it was very hard on him, very, very hard, emotionally, mentally, all of it. But he did learn to walk. But our first son, Hayden, was born while Luke was still on crutches. So 2 months after the amputation, Luke was there on his crutches holding my hand while Hayden was born. And he was learning to walk again, and he did. And then he, we considered him cancer-free every year on May 7th. He had lots and lots and lots of other health issues. We were in the hospital in and out many times. And we also went on to have 2 more kids. So at one time we had 3, ages 3.5 and younger.
Wow.
That was a crazy time.
Yeah, it's a busy moment.
But yes, but the doctors, the reason they're like so close together, doctors had said we'd never have any more kids. So we just kind of wanted to test that out, and we could. So
wow, as part of his prognosis, they said,
yeah, as the chemo would make it not possible. But we did that, and so we had 3 kids. It was a very busy time, and everything was, lots of health issues. But then fast forward 13 years. So we have, kids that are a lot older, and he noticed, like, we actually were playing baseball as a family. Like, he didn't get out and do things that often, but when he was able to, he did. And he fell and he landed, he thought it was his liver. Like, he felt his liver was hurting, something was hurting. So he finally went into the doctor. They did a scan of his liver and said the liver's fine, but they saw his lungs and found some tumors on his lungs. And we always knew that if it came back, it would be in his lungs, and that it would be terminal probably. And from everything we'd heard about this cancer, it's called mesenchymal chondrosarcoma, in case anyone's wondering, which is a type of sarcoma. Very, very rare. And so 13 years had passed. If you pass the 10-year mark, you're like, yes, most people survive. So it was devastating to find out at 13 years that it had come back. And so we didn't want to do chemo again, but we did. Like, it was like we researched everything, and it was like we had more motivation with kids, and it was much harder the second time going through cancer because I had kids that could understand what's going on. And so he started chemo again, different type. He didn't have to stay in the hospital. He had to carry around a bag at home. But it's still difficult. He got sick, all the things, and he just kind of just deteriorated. So I think after maybe a year or so, when it wasn't working, 1.5 years, we stopped the treatments because they were like, it's really about quality of life now. And we did so many things. This place called the Dream Foundation provided a free trip to Disneyland, which we had never been on a plane as a family. So that was amazing. And so we got to go to Disneyland with Luke, and we went to like Oregon Duck football games, which is his favorite team, Portland Trailblazer games, like all kinds of things that he wanted to do. We got to stay at the beach for free at this beautiful house during right when COVID had started and you couldn't get in anywhere, but a friend had a friend who had a house. Because one of Luke's thing at the end was like, I just want to see the Pacific one more time. We're in Washington. And anyways, there were so many amazing things at the end, but coming to a place to realize that he's dying it was hard to talk to my kids, and we're Christians, and, we pray all the time, and like, okay, God, we pray for for healing, but I had to say to my kids, his healing could be here or in heaven. Like, we don't know, and so we did that even until the night before he died. We prayed for that. And the hardest thing was watching him deteriorate, watching his big, strong body deteriorate to where he was frustrated. He wasn't able to remember things as well. His body was kind of like, he couldn't use his muscles as much. And it was just really, really difficult. And then for my kids to understand, they were, I'm just trying to remember the ages, 11, 13, and 15 when he passed away. And just to take them through that process, and that we don't understand all of this,
Was that a big part of the conversation with your kids, was having to just explain that there were things that were unknown?
Yes. And I kept them really in the loop. Like when the hospice nurse would come and we learned new things, and our hospice nurse was this amazing woman who I was able to text anytime with any questions, and Luke really liked her, and it was just a really good fit for our family. Like, that's an advice I have for people. Like, get on hospice as soon as you can. Like, it doesn't mean you're going to die. I think he was on it 9 months. Okay. And she said the average time is like a week or two, because people think, yeah, like you get on it, you're going to die. But the way I ended up convincing Luke is like, it's VIP care. We no longer have to go get your medicine. Your medicine comes to us. We have someone here. You don't have to go out to the doctor. And so I always encourage people I meet who are on the fence about it, do it. And it's going to help you as the caregiver so much to have another person there.
That's great advice. Because you're carrying so much too, caretaking children, a husband.
Yes. And at that point I had stopped working. I'm a teacher, and I wasn't doing any teaching at that point, just, to be home and do all the things. And so, after about 3.5 years from his second diagnosis, May 23rd, 2020, he passed away very peacefully. He actually passed away from a blood clot, not cancer. So, but that was caused by the cancer. I was trying to understand that with the doctor, like, would this have happened anyways? And she's like, no. So I'm the only one who saw him suffer. Like, he woke up and couldn't breathe very well, and I called hospice. And by the time I woke up the kids, he was calmly breathing, and he passed away calmly with all of us surrounded, singing to him, talking to him. And you're never prepared for that moment. Like, as much as the hospice nurse had tried to prepare us, you can't understand unless you've seen it, what it's like to see somebody and then they're literally gone. Like, it is, something else that people don't know about grief. I read this book called Anxiety, the Forgotten Stage of Grief. And that if you have watched someone die, your anxiety goes through the roof. And it doesn't mean it has to, but mine did. I never had anxiety in my life. I thought I was dying. Like 3 days later, I thought I had a blood clot, literally was passing out. My daughter trying to help me, thought I was dying. Wow. Because I just seen him die of a blood clot. So he had a blood clot in his calf. So he kept complaining about his calf hurting. And they said it broke off and either went to his heart or his lungs. Probably his lungs, because they were so full of cancer and couldn't survive. But it was peaceful, and he didn't go the way most cancer patients go, where it's very awful and very long drawn. Like, he could still walk. We had the best night the night before. We were like hanging out, watching TV together, having like this, like, he asked me to make him a grilled cheese sandwich at midnight. I made it for him. And, so we were together having conversations till right before he passed away. And I'm thankful for that. So that's a long, your question was love story. And I went through all of that.
That's okay. Is it hard to sort of be grateful for peaceful last moments that went in this beautiful way, but also feel conflicted that it's like at the same time you want more time with that person, but you're also grateful that they didn't have to linger in that space? How was that to balance those two feelings?
Yeah. In the beginning, it was hard because you just want them back, because it's so shocking to have them gone, because he was with us, like hanging out with us, like, and so it's so shocking, and you wish you would have had more time. But he was suffering so much. He coughed constantly. When he talked, which I have some recordings of him, he could barely talk, so I was thankful, that we believe he went to heaven and he's not in pain anymore. And so I am thankful, especially after when I got to know many more widows and widowers, and I hear their stories, and they had worse death stories. It makes me thankful. Even my hospice nurse is like, this is not the way it usually goes. We thought it was going to be this painful, excruciating death for him because he's younger and he's on so much pain medicine. But it was so beautiful. I mean, as beautiful as death can be, but it was way better than they expected. So I just hold on to being thankful that it was such a beautiful thing. And my daughter and him, they have a really special bond, and their song was "You Are My Sunshine," and she got to sing that to him, at the end.
The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. When I awoke, dear,
there were just so many beautiful moments. And I remember my youngest saying, "Daddy, you're the best daddy ever." And them all having, because I'm like, talk to him, he can hear you. And he did try to talk. He kept saying, like, and I go, I know you're trying to say I love you. And it was like, God gave me this like crazy peace where I was not crying. I was not upset. I was just like talking to him about, oh, you're going to meet my grandparents in heaven today. And like, I was just like really calm and, until after he passed, and then I lost it.
Did you feel like you had to be like that because your children were there, or was it just it came from an internal place or a divine place?
It just happened. Yes, it wasn't on purpose. I wasn't trying to hold anything. That's just, I was given this peace to be able to walk my kids through it, and his mom was able to be there at the end as well, and then my parents came, so I was able to be calm for my kids, but not on purpose. It just happened.
Well, yeah. And so you mentioned maybe this sort of idea when you know that your partner is close to death, or that there, could be that you have this way of approaching life of wanting to do these beautiful things and take advantage of beautiful moments. Do you feel like that philosophy is sort of carried on through your life now after Luke?
Oh yeah, 100%. When you've like faced death and you've seen someone die, it's like, I want to live more. I want to do more. I want to like not worry about the small stuff. I want to take trips, and we've continued to take trips and do fun things. And we talk about Luke constantly, oh, daddy would have liked this, or, oh, he wouldn't have liked this. Oh, he would have said this, like I want to keep him alive. And like, I want my kids to feel comfortable talking about him. I have a friend who her dad had died in high school, and she talked about how they never really talked about him after that, and how it was so hard. And so I want to like foster a place where we're constantly talking, you have to have like a balance. Like, it's not as much as in the beginning, but we still talk about him. And like I used to, so I've moved in my old house. I felt like it turned into a shrine to him. I had like so many pictures.
I have one of those.
Right? So when I moved, I made it like less. I put less pictures up. Doesn't mean that he means any less. It just means that we're not moving on, we're moving forward. I just heard this in a TED talk about it's moving forward, not on. Like, he will always be, isn't that great? Yeah. Not my original idea, but he will always be a part of us. And I think that's really important, especially as now I'm dating again. And so it's important that my new boyfriend, Joel, knows how important Luke is to all of us. In fact, when he comes to visit next week, we're going to go visit Luke's grave, because I told him like, that's really important to me. Like, I want him to be a part of that, and he's been really accepting.
Wow. And so will that be the first time that Joel has visited Luke's grave with you?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. My kids won't even go. So
really?
So we had a graveside service, which, it was right when COVID started. So we'd have 10 people. My friends, some of my family had to watch from their cars. It was so sad. But we did have a celebration of life months later with more people. But anyways, that was like the one time. And then my youngest son, whenever if he happens to be in the car when I'm like, I want to stop by, he won't get out of the car. My daughter will go with me, and she's put things at the grave that she's made before and stuff like that. But they don't like it, which is fine. Like, I'm like, you don't have to. And even though I know he's not there, like, it helps me. I'll tell him like what's going on. I mean, I'll probably be like, hey, this is Joel. Like, I'll just, I talk to him like he's there. It just helps me process things. And I'll tell him, hey, this happened with the kids this month or whatever. And I don't cry like I used to when I go there. I used to go every single month on the 23rd, the anniversary of his death. And now after a year, I did it every month for a year. And then now it's kind of like whenever, every couple months or something, no specific date, I'll just go. Yeah. So it's kind of how I do it now.
So now you've mentioned Joel. Can we hear the Joel love story?
Yes. Well, it's still in progress. And okay, about 4 to 6 months after Luke passed away, I started thinking like, at first I was like, I will never date again. Like, it made me sick to my stomach to think about it. Like, I'd be cheating, I could never do. I was married for 17 years and it just felt weird. But then I started getting used to the idea. I did like a few friends of friends dates and random Facebook stuff. Not great. I mean, I met like a few nice people, but everybody dating in your 40s versus your 20s, so different. Everybody has so much baggage, much stuff that it's like so different from the first time I dated. I was 24 when I got married. So, it was difficult. I never really like found anybody serious through that, but, Joel and I went to college together. It's interesting how it's so similar to Luke and I went to high school together,
Yes.
reconnected. It's so weird. And Joel and I went to college together, reconnected about last July. I was on Facebook and we weren't even connected on Facebook. It just said, recommended friend or whatever. And I was like, and it wasn't even his same last name, it was like his middle name, but I was like, I think I know him. And then I was like, add friend. And then I think I started talking to him first, and then he's like, hey, we should FaceTime. And then we started talking and totally friends for months. And he was listening to my podcast, supporting me in that, and just like, wow, you've been through a lot. And he just was a really good friend. And for me, and he'll admit this, like the feelings were growing first. Like his whole thing was like, I don't want to do a long distance. Like he said that he thought I was pretty and nice and all these things, but he never thought of it because he's like, I live in Louisiana, you live in Washington. Until one day I finally was like, I have to know. So I just straight up asked him, I'm like, hey, do you like me? Like I was a little kid. And he's like, well, what about long distance? I'm like, I don't care. Like if I didn't live in long distance, would you date me? He's like, oh, absolutely. And I'm like, then why don't we try? And he was like, okay.
Wow.
So we just started talking every day, and he made plans to come see me about a month later. And we just, through conversations, like really fell in love, and really just all you can do is talk. You can't go out and do the activities and do all the stuff, and there's nothing physical to cloud anything. It's like, you're purely getting to know somebody. Like you really get to know them. And we, FaceTimed every day. And I knew like I was falling in love with him before I met him in person again. And he came in November, and it was this beautiful moment. I actually have a TikTok. I made my daughter record it. I'm like, just record it like the moment we first saw each other in like 20 years. And him and his son came into Applebee's, and me and my kids were there, and we just hugged. It was like such a surreal moment. And so that night he ended up telling me that he loves me. And I was like, what? You do? I'm like, I love you too. Wow. And then it's just grown from there. We talk every day, and distance is hard, but we try to see each other as much as we can. Our goal is like once a month. And we've been together about 3 months. We've each other 3 times. He's coming next week. And then we have another trip planned, and we just know how important that is. And, we are very serious about each other. It's hard for my boys a little bit. Like it's not him personally. It's just someone that's not their dad.
Right.
Like they have lots of questions like, who would you choose, Joel or Luke? Joel or Daddy? And I'm like, I can't do that. They're different people. They're different loves. Is he going to be, to try to be our dad? I'm like, nope, never. Like they just have a lot. My daughter is much more like, I just want you to be happy. She's a 15-year-old girl, and just like super, like just happy that I'm happy. And the boys, they are now, 14 and 17, they are definitely more like, well, I don't think it's going to work. Like long distance never works. And like my youngest, who's 14, is like, he might just drop you. Guys do that.
Oh my goodness.
even funnier, the day that he was coming to visit for the first time, he was a little bit late coming from the airport. And I think it was Peyton, also my youngest, was like, he might not show up. Guys do that sometimes. They just don't show up. I'm like, so he's going to fly across the country and not show up? He's like, yeah.
Oh
like, I don't think so.
And
they're just like protective.
Yeah. Do you have a certain philosophy or way that you address those questions, or have decided to approach this with your kids?
Yeah, just that I always say, this does not mean I love your dad any less, but I don't want to be alone forever. And they're always like, but you'll have the dog. I'm like, yeah, but I want like a companion.
Right.
Like I want to have somebody here. Like I'm relatively young in the scope of life, hopefully. And I would like to be married again. I'm like, you guys are all going to be grown within 5 years. So I would like to have a future when you guys are all at college and all of that. And I found someone that loves me and treats me good, and I love him. And so we're just figuring it out one step at a time. This next visit will be more focused on, really spending a lot of time with the kids. We're going inner tubing and like on the mountain and like doing a bunch of fun things and just really trying to build those relationships. And so it's a lot of work, but so worth it. And Joel and I talk about a lot, like, I think love feels so sweet because we've both been through hard times, and to find someone after you've been through horrible things is amazing. And you appreciate it so much more because you have been to places you can't imagine. And then to find joy again, I mean, It's been absolutely beautiful and amazing. And like everyone who's walked through this journey with me is so happy. Like down to my counselor who's like, can I meet him when he comes? I'm like, sure. Like everybody who's seen me go through watching Luke die and then the process afterwards to where I am. I'm 20 months. Yeah, it's 20 months since Luke passed away. And in a place where I'm very happy, but I don't feel guilty. I think Luke would want me to be happy. And I actually think him and Joel would be friends. And like, I think that he would be happy about this. Now, on Earth, when he lived here, he would not have, like he very like, he couldn't talk about it. It was so hard for him to talk about when he's not here. He could not do it. And so he never talked to me about future relationships. It was just too hard for him, which I can see, that would be really hard. But now in his perfect state, Emily's happy for me. And I'm very, very, very happy and feel so excited about the future and so thankful for another chance at love. Some people never even get one in their lifetime. And so for me to already have found another person, it's amazing.
Yeah. You mentioned something really interesting, which is that you don't feel guilty. And I think some people, maybe you felt it, that people expect you or almost want you to feel guilty. Have you felt that pressure? How do you deal with that idea that you should be unhappy or
guilty? It's mostly from people I don't know. So I have a pretty big TikTok following, which is where I reach a lot of widows, which is my goal now, to inspire and help people, because I've got through the hardest part. I want them to know they're going to be okay. Like when Luke passed away, all I wanted to know is it will get better. I knew 6 widows. I called every one of them. And they all told me it would get better. And that's all I wanted to know. So that's my biggest message that I try to get out. And now I'm doing a lot of messages about dating again. But on TikTok, there's a lot of haters, especially they're not widows though. They're just random people. So it doesn't really bother me, but they're like, oh, so soon you must not have cared about your husband. And I've done a lot of reaction videos to like, I did this one yesterday where I put like mascara all down my face because they were like, you're dancing and you're a widow, blah, blah, blah. Like you shouldn't be doing that. And so I posted this video about, is this what you want? Society thinks we should just look like this every day. And all these widows are like, yeah, that's what people think. And it's just like, I'm just kind of trying to educate people too. Like, would you want, like, if you passed away, would you want someone you love to just be sad every day? Like, no. And trying to get people to realize just because you date again or you're happy does not mean you didn't love your spouse. Why do you need to stay in the sorrow in order to show that you love them? And so helping whoever you lost doesn't just have to be a spouse, whoever you love, they would not want you to just stay in that sorrow. They want you to live life and use them as an inspiration to keep living rather than like curl up and die. Like we all have a purpose. And so this, I believe, is part of my purpose now. It's a life I never wanted, but because it's here, I want to use it to help other people. And so I like to educate people who think, oh, that's too soon, or you shouldn't be, shouldn't be dancing and doing a happy dance. That's not appropriate for a widow. And I'm like, what is appropriate? Like, do I have to be sad forever? Like, there were the days, in the beginning, I cried every day, all the time. I couldn't get out of bed, like all the stuff for the first few months. So I went through it, but now to be in a place where I am happy every day. I explained it to people that in the beginning, my grief was like cloudy every day, and maybe I'd see a little bit of sunshine. And now it's the opposite. It's sunshine all the time. Sometimes I have the clouds and rain, where I'm missing Luke or have a moment like on Peyton's birthday. He turned 14 a couple days ago. I had moments because I thought about the day he was born. And then my grief is more for my kids now. It's about what they're missing. Like I feel okay. I feel good, but they will always have these milestones that their dad misses. And that's where my grief is now for them.
On those days that you feel the heaviness of grief, do you talk to Joel about that now? How do those conversations go if you have them?
Yeah. And this is what I advise when you start dating again is talk to your person about the grief. Don't shut them out. I know some people who are grieving that are dating other people tend to shut them out when they have grief. But I talked to him like on Peyton's birthday. I'm like, I'm having a really rough day. He's able to listen to me and he just listens and like, I'm sorry. And I wish I could understand. And he wants to be part about like knowing more about Luke and stuff like that. Like whenever I post videos, he wants to watch them that have like pictures of Luke. And things about him. He wants to know him better. And when I have grief, yeah. So what helped me through grief a lot is, well, grief counseling. I did a lot of that. And then getting connected in widow communities. That was big. Young and Widow with Children on Facebook is where I first connected. That's where I met Mark, who is my co-host of my podcast. We met on there and completely connected because both of our spouses died around the same time from cancer. And so whenever we had grief, we would reach out to each other and be able to talk about it. And for us, praying about it, just, being able to, the biggest thing I learned from my grief counselor is what we feel, we can heal. So if you're having an emotion, don't stuff it, feel it. Like if you're walking through the store, something reminds you of your loved one who passed away, you want to cry, cry, don't stuff it. So I learned that early on, and I always follow that, and I've taught that to my kids as well. And then my other counselor, she told me that when you, if you have grief and you don't feel it, it's like stuffing it down. And one day it's like being constipated and it's just going to stuff down, and you're going to explode one day and it's not going to be pretty. I had to explain this to my kids to give them the visual of like, you need to express your grief. You need to be able to, say how you're feeling and feel it. And so I encourage that a lot to people who ask me questions. I'm like, feel it. Let yourself feel it. You're crying doesn't mean it's a bad thing. If you're happy doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Whatever you're feeling about your grief, feel it.
That's such a strong message. I think that's such a common experience of people who are grieving is the experience of saying, oh, wow, grief isn't just being sad. And I don't really know, I'm having all of these feelings and I don't know who I can express them to. Mm-hmm. Do you have an opinion or a view on what it is that makes it so hard for us to embrace those feelings in grief and express them to other people?
I think people a lot have grown up to just like push away, the sad feelings, and like it's a coping mechanism sometimes. Like, I can't feel this. I have too much to do. I have to feel it. Or we're so busy that we don't feel it. But when you realize it's part of your healing, you take the time to do it. And so I think that's really important for anybody grieving to just really let yourself feel it. Like whatever you have to do, if you need to go into the bathroom and cry or go in your car and scream. I've done the screams before, the anger screams. They're just so from in your soul, and just feel it. I think that could be the biggest advice that I would give to people that are grieving, is to just feel it so that you can heal and express it. However you express it. Like I do it through writing or my TikTok videos or whatever. Like my daughter expresses through, she writes songs about her dad. My other son does raps, like whatever it is that helps you get that creative, grief, like out, do it. Like I really encourage people to just get those feelings out, because you don't want it to sit there and surface years later, affect your future relationships, all of that. And so it's been awesome because I've been able to educate Joel about that. And like he told me like his aunt was grieving, and he was able to tell her, you got to feel it. And like tell other people like how to get through grief is by feeling it. I mean, it's the simplest concept, but when you get that, I think it accelerates your healing a lot. Journaling is huge for me. I have always journaled my whole life. And it's interesting to go back and read my journals, or like through grief counseling, we wrote letters to our loved ones, like what would you say to them, and like different situations. And, one of the last exercises we did, it was something about what would your spouse say to you right now? And it was like right when I was thinking about dating again. And I felt like Luke was saying, like, I release you, like you loved me well, I release you to like date again. And that was powerful. Like, so, I guess that case, it was like, what would your loved one say to you instead of you to your loved one? And so that was interesting. Just so many tools. I mean, I think I've always been really good at personal development and personal growth, and like even more within grief. I went to a grief retreat 2 months after Luke died. That was super helpful, which it was COVID. It was amazing to find one. And it was like 60, men and women who had, it wasn't just grief for death. There were grief for divorces. Grief is big. It's not just death. People grieve when they get divorced. Sure. They grieve when they lose a job. They grieve, there's different definitions of grief. But anyways.
Was there a specific signal or sign that you found that let you know that it was time to start seeking out another partner?
It's just a feeling that I had, like, there wasn't really like, I'd say a sign or anything like that. It was just a feeling that I had that like, it was more like a desire in the beginning. Like, I think I want to talk to men again. Like, that sounds kind of fun, I guess, and then it just, I remember the first person like I ever, I didn't even talk. I just texted with a little bit. I did feel guilty in the very beginning, but then I just kind of released that. But I've never ever felt guilty with Joel. I think by the time I met him, it had been over a year and I was feeling completely at peace about dating again. But I think, I get the question a lot. How did you know you were ready? That's a common question on TikTok. And I think it's just, you just know, like, I can do this. And it's not like, if you're going to go on a date and go home and cry because, it just felt so weird, like maybe you're not ready, or maybe you try it. And if you don't like it, guess what? You don't have to do it again. Everybody's different. There's another thing my grief counselor would say, there's no timeline in grief. Like, you can't be like, at this point, I will be here. I know there is, like, there's acute grief and there's this grief. I mean, according to like all these scales, there is, but there's not really. Like, everybody deals with grief differently. You might have anticipatory grief like I did, where I knew he was dying, so I grieved before he died, versus someone who had a sudden death. So you cannot compare to someone else. That's another thing that's really huge, is to not compare your grief to anybody else's. Everybody's thing is different, but you'll know when you're ready. Like, when you start dating and it feels right, like, I don't feel guilty about this. And it might make you miss your spouse a little bit because it's not your spouse, but you'll know whether you're ready or not.
That's a great reminder to not be comparative in grief and not say, oh, am I doing it right? They look different than me, or their timeline is different. You've mentioned before, I think you speak a lot about loving two people at the same time, that you still love Luke, you love Joel, you're loving them both. What does that feel like? How has that experience been like, coming to terms with that?
Oh, it was good in the beginning. It was so weird. I would try to explain it to Joel that I can be in a moment, like looking at a photo album in the moment, totally missing Luke, thinking of all these memories. And then the next moment I'm like, oh yeah, Joel, and like talk to him and love him too. And so it's a very unique experience that I didn't know was possible. And I think a lot of widows don't realize. It doesn't mean you're letting go of your love with your late spouse. It just means this is how it was explained to me the first time I heard it on a podcast. It's like when you have a baby, you love that baby. You think you could never love another baby like the same as that. And then you have another baby and you're like, whoa, I love this one just as much. How did that happen? It's the same concept. I feel like your heart expands. And so you're able to still love your late spouse and honor them and respect them, but you're able to love someone else. And it takes a very special person who is confident in who they are to be okay with you still loving your spouse. I've heard horror stories of, men who are, or women who are not okay with that, who are jealous, and you don't want to date somebody like that. You want someone like, find that out right in the beginning. I mean, I asked Joel questions, right? And how would you feel about visiting the grave? How would you feel about pictures of Luke? How would you, and he's like, said it was a little bit to get used to, but now he really is okay with it. And, so I think loving two people at once is a beautiful, beautiful experience. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful thing when your heart can expand to still love your late spouse and love your new person.
So that those feelings of jealousy and all of that hasn't been part of your experience with Joel?
No, not even once. Like he said before, like, that was kind of weird seeing that picture of him with his arms around you, but I get it. Like, it can just feel weird for a second, And so, I mean, there wasn't no jealousy, just mentioning to me that felt a little weird, but that was your life, Or he saw a video where I was talking to Luke, and he said it felt weird watching that because that's how I talk to him now, but he gets it and he understands that was the love of my life, and now I have a new love. So
wow,
yeah,
it sounds like you have a really great way of communicating really openly together.
Yes. Oh, definitely. That is, in any relationship, the most important thing. And Joel is a very good communicator and like able to talk through like any little thing. And he's like gotten really good at reading my faces now. He's like, what else? I'm like, I'm talking to you in my head. Can't you hear it? Like, you got to tell me what you're thinking. And he's just really good at walking through it and like being very patient about grief and knowing this is part of who I am, reading. I think he said his dad sent him some books about grief. Like he's trying to really understand where I'm at. And even I had an older podcast I just told him about where I went through the whole journey with Luke as he was sick, after he died. And he's like, I sent it to him and he's like, I want to listen to it to like understand better what you went through. And, like he just always is wanting to understand better where I've been and who I am. And I mean, that's what you want in any relationship. Someone who cares enough about you that they want to study who you are. Like they want to know how you work. And so I feel super blessed to have somebody who really does want to know those things and support me. And yeah, it's been amazing.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Do you have, if someone's looking for advice, maybe if they're dating someone who's widowed, do you have advice for those people?
There's a really great article. Maybe you could link to it. I will get it for you. A widow wrote it, and it's called To Love a Widow, I think. And it is so good. I had Joel read that. That's another thing. Have them read it. It just talks about like what they've gone through, where they're going, what they're going to need from you. And like one of the things, like right after he read it, he's like, oh, it's like the article where I was like kind of like freaking out about a small thing that scared me. And it talked about sometimes widows will think things are bigger than they are because of what they've been through, or they're scared, about things. And just like everything, like really, that was in the beginning of our relationship. I had him read that, and he really, really, it helped him a lot. Just to understand where I was coming from. And yeah, so just being very, very, very open about where you're at. And you'll also, if you're the one, if you're the widow dating someone, you'll find out really quick if they are secure in who they are. And if they feel threatened by your late spouse, then they're probably not the one for you. If they're getting jealous, because you're going to, deal with this forever. And so you don't want to be with someone who's going to be jealous and not understand your love.
Now that you are in another committed relationship, do you ever get afraid that Joel will get sick, or that you'll have to go through that experience again? Is that something you think about?
Yeah, he's a pilot. So of course, like that comes, through my mind. What if he got in an accident or whatever? But it's better to have loved and lost than never loved at all. That's what I always say about Luke. And that's what I'm saying again. Actually, my youngest asked me that. Well, what if Joel got sick? What if Joel died? I'm like, well, then I would have spent time with him and loved him while he was here. And so, yeah, but I do know that's a big fear and a big reason that people don't get married again, because they're scared of something happening. And it has happened. I have a really good friend. She has 2 episodes on my podcast about, she's widowed twice by the time she was, I think, 35, already widowed twice.
Wow.
So it does happen. But she's still open to love. But I just think that I would rather know and have this experience. And, because Luke was sick, like our whole marriage, pretty much, we didn't get to do all the things I wanted to do, all the adventures, and he couldn't go hiking. We couldn't do all this stuff. And so now with Joel, I'm loving, like when I went to visit him, we went running, we played tennis, we went biking, like all these things I couldn't do with Luke. And it's like, I just want to live in this next stage of life. All of our kids are about to be grown, and we want to go travel and have adventures and do all of this stuff. And I'd rather do that and take a risk of one of us dying than just be by myself. And so that's why I look at it. I would rather keep living life. But that's a great question.
Wow, that takes so much bravery, I think, just to say it could happen. I've been through it. It hurts like hell. I'm going to try it again. I'm going to go and just live my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you see yourself getting married again?
Yes.
You do.
100%. Yes. Yes.
I have another question for you. I'm sort of nervous to ask this question, but I'm genuinely curious. So you're a practicing Christian who
yes.
So you presumably have this idea that after death you're reunited with people that you've loved and lost.
Yes.
If you were to get married in the future, and then in your afterlife, how do you see that happen? How do you see that going between Luke and Joel? What if they meet in the afterlife, for example?
That's a great question. In fact, okay, so I used to have these conversations with Luke, like, I want to be married forever. So in the Bible, it says that you're not married in heaven. And so he'd be like, sorry, you're not going to be married. I'm like, no, but I want to be married to you in heaven. But now being a widower and the chance to marry again, we believe that we'll be basically like brothers and sisters, and I'm not going to be married to either one of them. And I think they're going to get along great. And I think they're going to be friends, and it's going to be, but it is a weird thought. Definitely. Great question. But I've thought those things. No, it's a great question. Like, because that is something I used to, and I've talked with my co-host, he knows the Bible very well, like some of these questions, and he, reaffirmed like, no, we won't be married in heaven. And like, but that's why it's like, you can marry somebody else and it's not going to be, weird. But yeah, it is a very weird thought, but I believe by the, then it won't matter, and it'll just be like, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, and it's not going to be weird. But great question.
Thank you. Do you think that framework, because that is your belief, has emboldened you or made you feel more empowered to seek love again, that there can be this reunion?
Yes. And I believe that God told me, now I don't hear like an audible voice, but when I went to the grief retreat, I kind of had like a vision, I saw myself. So two things, like running across this field, and it was like I was a teenager again. And I used to be super fun and joyful, but after 17 years of all of the sickness and stuff, like it was really difficult. And I felt like God said, like, I'm going to bring you back to this, like back to the joy. And I've definitely seen that happening. And then the other thing, I felt like him say, I'm going to redeem and restore everything you lost in your marriage. Like I wasn't able to do all these things because Luke was sick. And then he brought me Joel, who can do all of these amazing things with me. And I just feel so excited. And definitely, so for me, my faith has been the biggest thing that has gotten me through this, for sure. And with my kids and all of that, and the hope of seeing Luke again, and that I am able to love again. And Joel and I share the same faith. And it's just been a beautiful, beautiful experience. Definitely.
That's really powerful to hear your experience. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Do you have any, you should definitely let us know how we can find your work, keep updated. If you have great resources for widows too that you've shared. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I have a website. It's michellebader.com. So just like my name, BADER.com. And my podcast that I started with my widower friend, Mark, is called Widowed Too Soon, with the number 2. You can find that in any podcast platform. If you want to see some interesting videos, I'm on TikTok at Widow Goals. My Instagram is also Widow Goals. So any of those places, you can find me, and I'll definitely get that article to you. So it's a great resource, and I might get that up on my website too. So yeah, it's been really, really fun, getting to share and all of that stuff. So thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. I'll link to all of that too in the notes, so it'll be easy for people to find you and reach out. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been really enlightening for me.
Yes, me too. It was really good. I love sharing my story. So, if I had to go through it, at least I can share it with others.
Yes, right? I mean, when you go through something so difficult, that's the best you can do, right? Like, I wouldn't learn these lessons this way again if I could pick, but I didn't get to pick.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's like you don't have a choice, so we can do good with it and help other people, which is, I know, what you're doing as well.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. As I listen back to this episode, I hear a very nervous version of myself. I was left to wonder what about the interview had me so nervous. After all, Michelle is such a kind and open person. Ultimately, I came back to the same thought. It feels like a sort of rebellious act to truly embrace joy after loss. And as I hear Michelle explore her own newfound joy, I'm confronted with the reality that so much of my joy still feels loaded. And while Michelle's joy makes me incredibly happy and full of hope, it also in some ways is a reminder of my own loss. So maybe it wasn't nervousness after all. Maybe I was just struggling to not get swept away in the memories of my dad that were coming up. And since this whole project is about more vulnerability and openness in this space, I felt really called to share that, just in case it makes someone else feel a little bit less alone in this moment. In our next episode, I talk with Sydney about what it was like to lose her father at a young age, how we can talk to children about grief and loss, and exploring the idea of death with children. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss it. And give us a rating if you are enjoying demystifying this space alongside us. This is Tess, and you have been listening to Ugly Cry.